The United States has more than $37 trillion in debt. Foreign buyers are pulling back. China is dumping U.S. treasuries. Japan is selling. By every historical standard, this system should already be breaking. And yet, the United States continues to operate as if nothing is wrong. Markets are open. Government spending continues. The dollar still dominates global trade. So the real question is not if the system is under pressure. The real question is how it's still standing. And the answer is not being discussed on financial news. Because what's happening right now is an accident. It follows a very old American playbook. A playbook the United States has used before, more than once, when debt reached unsustainable levels. And this time, that playbook involves cryptocurrency. Every 100 days, U.S. debt grows by another $1 trillion. Interest payments alone now exceed $1 trillion per year. That's more than defense spending, more than Medicare. And yet, there is no serious plan to cut spending. No political appetite to raise taxes. So something else has to absorb the pressure. Recently, a surprising theory surfaced from outside the United States. At an international economic forum, a senior Russian economic advisor suggested that America already has a plan. Not a default, not a collapse, but a reset. A reset that uses crypto, stablecoins, and monetary mechanics most people don't understand. Many dismissed it as paranoia, geopolitical propaganda. But before we judge that claim, we need to look at history. Because when you examine how the United States has handled debt crises in the past, a very clear pattern emerges.
And once you see that pattern, what's happening today becomes impossible to ignore.
To understand what may be happening now, we need to go back to how the United States has handled debt crises before, because this wouldn't be the first time. In 1933, during the Great Depression, the U.S. government faced an impossible problem. Debt was overwhelming. Deflation was crushing the economy. The gold-backed system was suffocating growth. So President Franklin D. Roosevelt took a radical step. He signed Executive Order 6102. Americans were forced to hand over their gold to the government at $21 per ounce. Once the gold was collected, the government revalued it to $35 per ounce overnight. That single move devalued the dollar by 67%. Your money didn't disappear on paper, but its purchasing power did. And just like that, the government's debt became dramatically cheaper to repay. No default, no negotiation, just devaluation. Fast forward to 1971. Foreign governments were holding massive amounts of US dollars, expecting they could redeem them for gold. The problem was simple. The gold wasn't there. So President Richard Nixon closed the gold window. The dollar was no longer backed by anything tangible. Since that moment, the US dollar has lost over 90% of its purchasing power. Again, no default, just another reset. Then came 2008. The financial system nearly collapsed under the weight of debt and leverage. This time, the reset came through quantitative easing. Money was created digitally on an unprecedented scale. From 2020 to 2025 alone, the money supply expanded by more than 40%. Debt stayed the same on paper, but in real terms, it became far easier to service. Gas prices rose, housing prices exploded, food costs surged, and once again, debt was reduced through devaluation. Different eras, different tools, same strategy. The United States doesn't default, it devalues. And if history is any guide, when debt reaches extreme levels, a new version of this playbook always appears. The question now isn't if another reset is coming, it's what form it will take. And this is where cryptocurrency enters the story.
Now here's the problem. The old playbook is starting to fail. In the past, inflation worked because the pain was spread slowly and quietly. Prices crept higher. Wages lagged behind. Savings lost value over time. Most people felt it, but they didn't immediately connect it to government debt. Today, that's no longer true. Inflation hits faster. It hits harder, and people notice it immediately. Grocery bills spike. Rent explodes. Mortgage payments become unaffordable. And when inflation becomes visible, political pressure builds. Voters get angry. Approval ratings collapse. Governments are forced to react. That creates a ceiling. There is only so much domestic inflation a government can tolerate before the public revolts. This is the key limitation of the old system. Inflating the currency inside your own borders concentrates the pain on your own population. And that's exactly what leaders try to avoid. For decades, the United States solved this problem by exporting inflation. Because the dollar was the global reserve currency, the rest of the world absorbed part of the damage. Foreign governments held U.S. debt. Foreign banks held dollars. Global trade settled in dollars. When America inflated, everyone paid the price. But that system is breaking down. Foreign ownership of U.S. debt has collapsed. China has dumped hundreds of billions in treasuries. Japan is selling. Other nations are quietly stepping back. They've seen this movie before. They understand the playbook. And they no longer want to hold it back. This creates a dangerous situation. The U.S. still needs massive buyers for its debt, but traditional buyers are walking away. So inflation alone is no longer enough. The pain is too visible at home, and the demand for debt abroad is fading, which means the system needs something new. A mechanism that spreads devaluation globally without triggering immediate political backlash at home. And that brings us to the most misunderstood piece of this entire puzzle: stablecoins.
This is where stablecoins enter the story. And this is the part almost nobody understands. Stablecoins are marketed as crypto innovation, as faster payments, as financial inclusion. But structurally, they do something far more important. They create automatic global demand for U.S. government debt. Here's how it works. By law, dollar-backed stablecoins must be backed by cash or U.S. Treasury securities. When someone buys a stablecoin like USDT or USDC, the issuer doesn't just hold the money. They buy U.S. Treasuries. Every single time. Right now, stablecoin issuers collectively hold more U.S. government debt than many entire countries. And that number is growing fast. When someone in Argentina escapes inflation using stablecoins, they become a treasury buyer. When a business in Turkey settles payments using stablecoins, they become a treasury buyer. When a freelancer in Africa stores savings in stablecoins, they become a treasury buyer. They don't realize it, but they're funding America's deficit. This solves a massive problem for the U.S. Foreign governments don't want to buy treasuries anymore, but individuals around the world are doing it automatically through stablecoins. And here's the genius part. This demand doesn't look political. It doesn't look like central banking. It looks like private technology. Tether is a private company. Circle is a private company. Future issuers could be tech giants. There's no single institution to blame, no obvious villain. Meanwhile, the debt gets absorbed quietly, globally, and continuously. And now comes the most important shift. With stablecoins, devaluation no longer happens mainly inside the domestic banking system. It happens across millions of users worldwide. When the dollar loses purchasing power, it doesn't just hurt Americans. It hurts everyone holding dollar-based digital tokens. The pain is exported, distributed, difficult to organize against. This is what the Russian economist meant by moving debt into the crypto cloud. It's not science fiction. It's financial engineering. And once this system reaches enough scale, it changes everything. To understand why this matters, you need to see the pattern. Because this would not be the first time the United States reset its debt without defaulting. In 1933, during the Great Depression, President Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102. Americans were forced to turn in their gold at $21 per ounce. Shortly after, the government revalued gold to $35 per ounce. That single move devalued the dollar by 67% overnight. The government's debt instantly became 67% cheaper to repay. No default, no negotiation, just devaluation. In 1971, President Richard Nixon closed the gold window. Foreign governments holding dollars were told they could no longer redeem them for gold. The promise ended. Since that moment, the dollar has lost over 90% of its purchasing power. Again, no default, just another reset. After 2008, the strategy became more subtle. Quantitative easing, trillions of dollars created digitally. The money supply exploded. Debt stayed the same on paper, but became cheaper in real terms. Assets rose. Savings lost value. The system reset quietly. Every time the debt became unmanageable, the solution was the same. They didn't default. They devalued. And every reset followed the same sequence. First, a crisis makes the system unstable. Second, a new mechanism is built quietly in the background. Third, adoption spreads while attention is elsewhere. And finally, the devaluation happens. the tool changes. The logic never does. What makes this moment different is the scale. Stablecoins allow devaluation to be distributed globally instead of domestically, and that changes the political limits entirely. Which brings us to the most dangerous phase of this cycle. Because once the mechanism is built and adoption is widespread, the final trigger can arrive quickly. So where are we right now in this cycle? We are not at the beginning, and we are not at the end. We are in the most important phase, the construction phase. Phase 1 is already complete. The legal and regulatory foundation has been built. The Genius Act passed. Clear rules were created for dollar-backed stablecoins. Approved issuers were established. The system was made official. That phase quietly wrapped up in early 2025. Phase 2 is where we are now. Adoption. Stablecoin usage is accelerating rapidly. Transaction volumes are up more than 50% year over year. Supply is growing at roughly 40% annually. Major companies are integrating stablecoins into payment systems. Cross-border transactions are shifting away from traditional banks. Most people think this is innovation. Very few realize it is infrastructure. This is how the new system spreads. Not through force, through convenience, through speed, through access. Every new stablecoin user becomes a treasury buyer. Every transaction deepens the mechanism, and almost no one notices what is being built underneath. Phase 3 comes later, and it always looks obvious in hindsight. That is the trigger phase, the moment when devaluation accelerates. It may come through traditional inflation. It may come through a policy event. It may come through a crisis. But by then, the mechanism is already in place. The debt burden drops, purchasing power drops, and the pain is shared globally, not concentrated domestically. That is the entire point. Right now, we are standing at the edge between Phase 2 and Phase 3. The foundation is built. Adoption is accelerating. The only missing piece is the trigger. And history shows that triggers rarely announce themselves in advance.
So how will you know when Phase 3 is approaching? The system always leaves signals, and this time is no different. The first signal is acceleration, not gradual growth. Acceleration beyond projections. If stablecoin adoption suddenly exceeds expectations, that is not organic. That is systemic demand being pulled forward. The second signal is corporate participation. When large technology companies, payment networks, or retailers announce their own stablecoins, that is not innovation hype. That is institutional alignment. It means the rails are being embedded into everyday commerce. The third signal is narrative shift. Listen carefully to the language. You will hear phrases like modernizing the dollar, bringing money into the digital age, improving efficiency and inclusion. That language always appears before a reset. It is not education. It is marketing. This is how transitions are sold. Quietly, gradually, without resistance. Now, what does preparation actually mean? It does not mean panic. It does not mean selling everything. It means understanding exposure. Systems based on debt do not fail by default. They fail by devaluation. History is clear on this. Hard assets tend to survive these transitions better than paper claims. Energy, commodities, precious metals, real assets with intrinsic utility. Diversification matters more in unstable systems than in stable ones. And most importantly, awareness matters more than prediction. You do not need to know the exact date. You only need to know the direction. Every major reset looks impossible until it happens, and obvious once it does. The purpose of understanding this cycle is not fear. It is positioning. Because when systems change, those who understand the mechanism are not surprised. They are prepared. And in moments of systemic transition, preparation is everything.